Welcome to Biography Break, where each week you are introduced to a new picture biography of a person you should know, read by somebody you do know. This week's biography is called Thanks to Frances Perkins, Fighter for Workers' Rights, written by Deborah Hopkinson and read by our very own Ms. Townhouse.
Thanks to Frances Perkins, Fighter for Workers' Rights, written by Deborah Hopkinson, illustrated by Christy Caldwell. Let's start with two math questions, especially for you young readers. How many years will it be until you turn 62? What year will that be? Now, hold on to your answers until the end, when you'll find out why this is important, and why, when you get there, you'll want to thank Frances Perkins. Frances was born in 1880 in Boston. Her father believed in education. Her mother taught her to help neighbors in need, and her wise grandmother said that whenever a door of opportunity opened, Frances should go through. Perhaps that's why Frances grew up trusting in both her heart and her mind. At a time when few women went to college, Frances earned a master's degree. She went to work in New York City, where immigrant families lived in crowded, ramshackle tenements. Men, women, and even children toiled day after day from dawn to dark in dirty, unsafe factories called sweatshops. Bosses and factory owners held all the power. Workers had few rights or benefits. On Saturday, March 25th, 1911, Frances witnessed a terrible tragedy. While having tea with a friend in Washington Square, Frances heard fire whistles and shouts. She rushed outside. She saw flames pouring from high up in the Triangle Waist Company building, where young women sewed white blouses called shirtwaists. When the fire broke out, the workers were trapped by locked doors. Some made it out onto window ledges, but the firemen's nets weren't strong enough to catch those who jumped or fell. 146 people, mostly teenage girls, perished in a tragedy that shocked the nation. A week later, still heartbroken and stunned, Frances went to a memorial gathering where young labor activist Rose Schneiderman spoke. Rose declared that the time had come for change. "Too much blood has been spilled," she cried. Rose urged workers to unite in the fight for better conditions. Frances was so moved by Rose's words, she decided to join the fight for justice too. She wanted to help make new laws to force factory owners and employers to treat people better and make workplaces safer. So Frances went to work for a committee set up to improve safety and to keep tragedies like the Triangle factory fire from ever happening again. Frances began by learning all she could. She visited factories, sweatshops, and laundries looking for fire and accident hazards. Sometimes she made surprise visits, taking important New York lawmakers like Alfred E. Smith into factories before dawn to see children working. Frances's heart was stirred by tragedy, but she also used her mind, a mind, she once said, that inquires, penetrates, goes to the bottom of things, puts two and two together, and comes to some sort of logical conclusion that have authority. And Frances did have authority. People listened to her, even though in the halls of government and power, she was often the only woman. She met with lawmakers, learned to persuade and compromise, and never gave up. In 1912, Frances helped to get a bill passed to limit the work week to 54 hours for women and children under 18. When she noticed how painful it was for women to sit for long hours on stools, she helped the workers get chairs with backs. As more new laws to benefit workers came into being in New York, the state became a model for the nation. The changes Frances fought to bring about made all Americans more aware of the importance of social responsibility and the welfare of others. It was, Frances later said, a turning point. People respected Frances for her hard work and determination. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt became governor of New York in 1928, he asked her to run the state's labor office. On November 4th, 1932, Roosevelt was elected president. It was a difficult time. The country had plunged into the Great Depression. Millions of Americans lost their jobs. Children went hungry. The person Roosevelt chose to be Secretary of Labor would face enormous challenges. No woman in American history had served in a president's cabinet. But one day, Frances received a call. Roosevelt wished to see her. Frances could guess what he wanted to ask, and she was ready. Whenever Frances had an idea about how to make things better, she scribbled it on a small slip of paper. Then she stuck it in the lower right-hand drawer of her desk. Now she pulled out those slips to make a long list of her bold ideas for change. Frances wanted to help create a society where no one was left out. She wanted a minimum wage for workers. She wanted unemployment insurance to provide temporary benefits to people who lost their jobs. Frances had another grand idea too, a program to give Americans a rock of security under them when they were sick, unable, or too old to work. The program would also help families if one parent died. Today we call Frances's idea Social Security. Roosevelt listened to her ideas and wondered if they could all be done. He told her, "You have to invent the way to do these things," and that is exactly what Frances did. It wasn't easy for Frances to move from New York to Washington. Her husband was ill and often in the hospital. Although her daughter Susanna was now a teenager, Frances often had to leave her in the care of others. But Frances knew she had to try to make things better, not only in her own time, but for generations far into the future. When Frances Perkins set about to change history, she did it the best way she knew how, little by little, step by step, using her heart and her mind. She listened to ideas, gave speeches, made plans, and gathered people to work with her. The process was long and complicated. Once, to meet a deadline, Frances invited committee members to her house and locked the door until they finished their work at 2 a.m. Social Security was one part of President Roosevelt's New Deal to help America recover from the Depression. He signed the Social Security Act into law on August 14th, 1935. Frances was standing right there. Today, Social Security provides help for survivors, the children or spouse of a worker who has passed. It supports children and adults with disabilities. The program also benefits older people who've paid Social Security taxes during their working lives. Through Social Security, we've built a society where we help one another. An idea that began as a slip of paper in Frances Perkins' desk has become a vital part of our democracy. Now back to those math questions. Although it might well change in the future, right now most people can begin receiving Social Security benefits as early as, you guessed it, age 62. So whether you benefit from Social Security now or on some far off day, think of this dedicated public servant and remember to say, "Thanks, Frances."